fade. Fuck that bitch, I pass it to my brody, y'all. Pump fade, fuck it, deal, pass it to my brody, y'all. Pump fade, I don't need no bitch, I got another one. Pump fade, I don't give a fuck, I got another.
I found a cool bottle on the beach, and like any normal person, decided to put an air tag inside of a seashell, conceal it with white epoxy resin, put it inside the bottle to track its journey, and write a poem with coordinates to a treasure that I buried in the jungle. The treasure consisted of various coins, a shot glass, a wooden watch, some sparkly geodes, a cigar, and 10,000 yen. I buried it by a small stream and drove a stake into the ground to mark the spot. The poem read, "Oh, what fortune brought by sea, 8 billion souls, and straight to thee. For chance and fate no mortal measure, for thee here lies a buried treasure." I rolled it up, put it in the bottle, threw in a crisp 5,000 yen bill, closed up the bottle, and threw it off a cliff into the sea below. To offset my debt to nature, I picked up 2 bags of trash from the beach. Stay tuned for part 2 to see where the bottle ends up.
Dear Crayola, many color theory teachers like myself use your products. Crayola crayons are just about synonymous with the joy of discovering and exploring color. However, I'd like to suggest that the current lineup of the 24-pack could be adjusted. I'm sure you must know that while the red and scarlet crayons look different, they color the same, and you must be aware that orange and yellow-orange are rather close together in hue, while green and blue-green are quite far apart. In fact, if we plot the 24-pack to a perceptual color space, we can see a number of irregularities as we go around the hue circle. For instance, look at how green-yellow is basically a lower chroma yellow. Of the 24 crayons, 18 are full chroma hues, so why aren't they more evenly spaced? You wouldn't need to create new colors to do this. You already have the colors needed in the 120 pack, but not everyone wants, needs, or is willing to shell out for the 120 pack. So here is my proposal for a 24 pack, a kind of color theory teaching edition. In this set, I've deleted 8 crayons and replaced them with Wild Strawberry, Bittersweet, Banana Mania, Granny Smith, Jungle Green, Robin's Egg Blue, Royal Purple, and Plum. This set of hues is more evenly stepped. I found the high chroma crayons whose readings were closest to 20-degree intervals of hue. Using these colors would therefore help teachers more clearly illustrate what hue is as a quality of color perception. Right now, in contrast, yellow and green yellow are labeled as though they were different hues, but in fact they're nearly identical. Scarlet is redundant in hue to red, and so on. In closing, Crayola, I hope you take this video for what it is, a love letter to your crayons and their usefulness to the pedagogy of color. Please consider the value of packaging crayons aimed at science-based color theory instruction. Yours truly, Peter.
25% of all discovered animal species are beetles. Here's one I think that you will like. The featherhorns beetle, named for their flamboyant antennae. As it usually goes in the animal kingdom, males are the ones with the crazy shit. Their antennae are much more pronounced, because they have about 300 times the amount of receptors as females do to locate pheromones. Males will position themselves at some high point, facing into a breeze, and use their antennae to locate females that are pumping out pheromones, indicating they are ready to mate. Despite their somewhat British appearance, they're actually found in Australia, and not much more is known about them. They're a pretty rare beetle.
This is maybe one of the oldest Steven Universe sketchbooks. Sketchbooks really psych me out, so I ended up taping together like a bunch of just trash so that I wouldn't feel nervous about drawing in it. Really, really early garnet and amethyst. Super early Steven, super early Pearl. It was based off drawings. I always did drawings of my brother, my younger brother, Steven. I wasn't sure necessarily what the age of the character would be. I was trying to draw like Waker Link, to be like, he has to get cuter. This is like, I took all the wrong lessons from Waker Link. Super early garnets. Early concept. Early on, we already knew we were gonna do fusion. Oh, early Connie. Early Lars and Sadie. These characters didn't end up in the show. There are a few early human characters that didn't make it into the show. One of them is in here a lot, which is a Pizza Man character.
This is a graph of how frequently the word Pokemon has been used over time. There's a small bump in the 1800s. Now, why exactly was someone in the Victorian era talking about Pokemon? One answer might be in the 19th century Cornish dialect of English, which had a slang term spelled Pokemon or Pokemen and meaning clumsy. Sidebar, there are so many incredible slang terms in Cornish. Poochie mouth, meaning having prominent lips. Polrumptions, meaning restlessness. These are just the P's. But back to Pokemon. Apparently, in the late 1800s, a lot of people started making dictionaries and glossaries of Cornish slang terms, and that partially explains the small bump I showed you. So yeah, the word is completely unrelated to the Japanese video game name, which just comes from pocket monsters.
Making your own coconut yogurt is so easy, I can teach you in under 60 seconds. But wait, why would I want to make that? Okay, let's be so for real. Between the two of us, both of us probably could use an extra billion probiotics in our colon, so let's make this. We got ourselves some coconut moo. You want it to have not a lot of ingredients, but you do want it to have like guar gum or another emulsifier, otherwise it'll separate. Now that we have our milk, we are going to add 2 open capsules of a probiotic. This is the one that I use. I'm gonna tell you right now, using capsules is so much easier because if you use tablets, you're gonna have to break them apart first. Now we're gonna slap a lid on this guy and shake her up. And now let it ferment at room temperature for 24 hours for mild, 48 hours for tangy, which is what I prefer. My dehydrator is running, so I'm gonna leave her on top of it to speed up the process. You need those good bacteria to breathe, so take off this part of the lid and replace it with like a paper towel or a dish towel. Here, now take a look at the one I already made. Say hi to the Misa. It's thick, it's creamy, it's delicious, it's like an unsweetened Greek yogurt. Bone apple teeth, here's to a happy gut. It'll keep in the fridge for 7 days after it's done fermenting. Bye.
Drop it to the flow, drop it to the flow then. Now lean then. Turn around then. Turn around then. Now wiggle, 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 wiggle. Play this.
Today we are talking about the science of fufu, fermented cassava edition. West Africans have been fermenting a variety of indigenous products for millennia, but the fermentation process of cassava is a relatively recent practice brought back with enslaved Africans returning back to the continent at a point in time where cassava was still a newly introduced crop to Africa. Cassava is an interesting root because in its raw state it has little to offer and contains a number of anti-nutrients including cyanogenic glucosides, which you should not be consuming. Submerging cassava in water produces an aerobic to anaerobic environment that allows various bacteria and yeast to break down the starches of the cassava, reducing the pH and allowing for the breakdown of the cyanide compounds as well as improving the nutritional value of the cassava itself. The final product relies on many factors, most importantly the cassava itself, the temperature and microbes, especially the ones on your skin and in the air. So it is no surprise that fufu made in Nigeria has a stronger smell and better texture just based on their environment. In the end, West Africans took a process they inherited from indigenous Brazilians, Vai, returned enslaved people to make uniquely African foods. A step-by-step process is in the caption below.
These are some traditional Inuit clothes I can't wait to pass down to my baby. So we're actually not finding out if it's a boy or a girl, but I have both me and my brother's clothes. So if it's a boy, I have this little atikuk that was my brother Winter's. I tell it's a boy's because the bottom is shorter and straight. And this was mine, you guys, this is so cute. I love this. This is the most precious thing ever. These were Winter's little muskox mitts. This is a cute little picture of him wearing them in front of the reindeer herd. And these were my little sealskin mucklucks. You can see me wearing them in this picture. I also still have this parka. If it's a girl, I have so many cute parkas. I also have this parka I think I wore in grade 6. These were my little rabbit mitts. They're so cute and tiny. And these were my first little moccasins. I'd be happy for a boy or a girl, but if it's a girl, these will be their first too.
This is the most unhinged language I've ever come across. It's called robbing hood and it's entirely communicated by committing burglary in various houses across Oklahoma City. The part of speech is determined by which area of the city you steal from. The last digit of the house you steal from is used for polypersonal agreements so chaotic it should be a crime in and of itself. And the grammatical gender is determined by whether you steal from a rich house or a poor house. What you take from a house, of course, also carries grammatical information, and the only way to end a sentence is by covering the Oklahoma State Legislature in toilet paper. Obviously, a main concern for people speaking robbing hood is how can people differentiate between between you trying to communicate to them and an unrelated robbery occurring. So in addition to just taking place in Oklahoma City, all speakers of robbing Hood must leave a martini glass filled with maple syrup in each house they burglarize. Alright, let's go through an example sentence. To say I'm a weirdo, you must first steal money from a rich house in the southwestern quadrant ending with a 0. Then you must steal money from a poor apartment in the northwestern quadrant also ending in a 0. Then you must break into a poor house in the northeast quadrant ending with a 6, and instead of stealing something, leave a puppy. Finally, you, of course, toilet papered the Capitol building.
The thing that makes traditional architecture so incredibly cool is the concept of Kaizen, right? Continuous improvement. The locals, the village, the community builds houses, but then they get hit by an earthquake. What happens? They adapt. They make their homes earthquake-proof. A storm happens, fire spreads, animals attacks. They adapt. So what a foreigner might come in and deem a mundane, primitive, backward mud hut ends up being like the most bulletproof, fireproof, earthquake-proof, sturdy, ventilated home we've ever seen. Because it's built off generation and generation of trial and error. When I made a video explaining this, there were a bunch of comments like, oh, pretty hypocritical of you talking about traditional architecture while you're using Wi-Fi right now. You can't really assess someone's quality of life depending on what their house is made of, but like, sure, I get where you're coming from. Most people don't want to live like their ancestors pre-industrial revolution. My video was not a reject modernity, return to tradition, the industrial revolution and its consequences type of video. That does not mean that tradition is unimportant though. Let me give you an example. If you don't know me, hi, I'm Sarah, I talk about art, and let me introduce you to the living legend, the man himself, Francis Carré. The architect was born in Burkina Faso, and his home village didn't have a school to attend. So after studying architecture, he built this, the first school in his village. But what makes this building so incredible is the fact that it was built completely using local material and local labor. He would use clay and mud, which was very available in the region. And because traditionally the whole community would work together to build stuff, you had was women bringing in water for brick manufacturing, children being involved, and it ended up being sustainable, well ventilated, good lighting, all while using local knowledge. And this is one example from his incredible line of work. It's not just local materials that he uses, but also tradition. For example, the palaver tree, part of West African tradition, where the entire community would sit under a big tree and discuss the issues happening within. He described it as true democracy, and he used that as inspiration to build the Berlin Parliament. Again, in London, taking inspiration from sitting under a tree in his home village. Even though he has a lot of projects where he uses mud because it's available and sustainable, his work isn't restricted to it. He finds whatever materials is available in that local region and use that. He emphasizes sustainability, inclusivity, community. I'm going to remind you that it's never that black and white. It's not tradition good, modern bad. For example, we've seen such a rise in population, and as a result, you see these apartment complexes cramping in hundreds of people. People need a roof over their head. There is a lot of nuance to this, right? What I can tell you for certain, though, is that traditional architecture is important to preserve. We need to preserve the knowledge of people who had such a superior understanding of their environment and how to build for their environment with their environment. So many of it has already been lost. Buildings alone are responsible for 40% of energy-related carbon emissions. Just because cement is a modern invention does not necessarily mean it is a superior building material. Stop erasing local and indigenous architecture from syllabuses.
What a gift! Oh my good golly gosh! Chicken of the woods, and their edges are still so round and plump. They're perfect. They're all perfect. I get a lot of questions on how I preserve mushrooms for the future if I gather too much to eat in one sitting, and I'm gonna show you with these just gorgeous chicken of the woods. I'm gonna go ahead and slice off just a couple of these bunches. Honestly, I feel like I need to leave the rest. The area where we're harvesting has lost a lot of their chickens the last couple of years from over harvesting, so I'm just freaking out. This is so much, and this is like not even a fourth of what we saw. First, I'm cleaning them off and making sure there are no buggies in some warm, salty water, but honestly, these guys were so fresh that there's like not a lot to clean off. For chicken of the woods, I would never put them directly into the freezer. Once you thaw them, the texture and the taste will never be completely right again. The two ways that I preserve them are I pickle them using a hot pickle brine. Here, let me actually show you some that I pickled. These guys, which I preserved in some dill pickle brine taken right out of the pickle jar. If you hot water process them the right way, those can last in the fridge for such a long time. Otherwise, if you're doing it the lazy way, like I normally do, it'll last in the fridge for a couple of weeks, or you can freeze them in their brine and then thaw them later. Or you can do what I'm doing right now, which is giving them a nice saute in a mild neutral oil and then freezing them. This makes such a huge difference, and putting them in the freezer means that they can last months instead of just weeks. Or in the case of of not preserving them lasting just days or hours. Food preservation is a very important part of what I do, and I don't talk about it a lot because I'm afraid that it's boring. I'm gonna go ahead and add some sunflower oil to my handy dandy Fiscus pan, and it's time to start throwing in our cleaned chickens. I love how much more vibrantly orange chickens get when you cook them. I like to cook these until you start noticing the littlest bit of browning. People say they have tummy troubles with chicken of the woods, or they worry about chicken of the woods harvested from certain trees, when usually the issue is they are eating chickens that are not cooked thoroughly. Okie dokie, let's move these guys off the heat because we're gonna be bagging them up and we don't want them to melt the bag. Now they've cooled down and I've packaged our mushrooms in 2 bags with as much of the cooking oil as possible, and now they are ready for the freezer. I'm gonna give one to our neighbors and keep one for us. And that wasn't even all of them. The rest are going into a vegan chicken tikka masala for dinner. Hope that you learned something about preserving your mushroom harvests. Happy snacking, don't die.